It's nice to look back in history and see the way things used to be in Miami, but some things don't change, like Tobacco Road, for instance. It was 1912 when it first opened its doors, the oldest bar in Miami with liquor license number 0001. It's been through a lot in 74 years. It's been raided, invaded, and renovated. It's seen wars, the Depression, and even Prohibition. But somehow, Tobacco Road lived through it all.
In the 30s, it was a gambling casino, and supposedly in the 20s, it was a cat house for a while. In the 1950s, it was a French restaurant for about 10 years. It changed its name to the Chanticleer.
But mostly, it's been just a bar, a place for the locals to sit down and have a beer.
Everyone's so nice to you when you come in. You know.
Kind of funky, but a lot of fun.
And people, everybody that walks in, they first say, oh, this is a bar, this is great. There's no bars in Miami. There's little bars that sit inside of a restaurant, but there's very few bars.
That's true. You do find the longest bar in Miami here, long enough for 42 people to pull up their stools. But the eclectic crowd who comes here isn't looking for fancy drinks or fancy decor. They're looking for nostalgia.
And this is something that's the real McCoy. It's authentic.
A lot of that in the walls and the air here, you know, it's this atmosphere that definitely is 74 years old.
And you know, that's what this story is really all about. I wanted to do a story on Tobacco Road's 75th birthday, 1 year early. That way, next year when you come here, you'll know what this place is all about, and you'll know where you heard it. John Holden, News 4. Some say it all started as just a spoof on that other parade across town, the King Orange Jamboree, but most will claim the King Mango Strut Parade is that once-a-year opportunity to give recognition to those Florida groups who otherwise would probably go unrecognized. Groups like Florida's Fruit of the Loom, the Miami Snow Club, South Florida's 21 most eligible bachelors, and the Florida Ladies Against Women.
Tacky, they're always demonstrating and marching and being rowdy.
ERA, go away! ERA, go away!
No, these aren't protest groups. These are just the kind of people who are attracted to a parade aimed at putting the nut back in Coconut Grove. I mean, where else do you find the world's greatest Jewish-American princess teamed up with the world's greatest wasp? Now, you're probably wondering, how do these people come up with such original names? Well, sometimes it's as simple as pooling your resources, like your name. Excuse me, what's your name?
Fred.
And your name?
Fred.
Your name?
It's Fred.
I'll bet you your name is Fred.
How'd you know that?
Your shirt gave you away. With so many Freds, it's only natural this group entered the parade as the Marching Freds. Would you believe every one of these marching feet is a Fred? Except for a few, the brothers of Fred, a barking Fred, and of course the mother of Fred. And for everyone who isn't a Fred, like the parade's not-so-grand Marshal Austin Burke, the Mango Strut is simply the opportunity to exchange those wacky views or change views.
Miami is far from being a was. It's going to be fabulous for the future.
Everybody here comes out and says what they really feel about everything.
Sure, I want to get across to the people that it's great to get out there and not have to wear bathing suits.
Just have fun and be yourself. I'm trying to stop smoking.
And what about the main aim of the King Mango Strut? Is the nut still in Coconut Grove?
Oh, I think you could come to your own conclusions about that.
John Holden, News 4. This is Grendels Park, an unusual park in the fact that it's all man-made, from its lake and nature trails to its golf course and sculptures. But there's one man-made object that stands out here, and if you sit back to enjoy nature, it's hard not to take notice of what Grendels Park is famous for. The Grendels Park Mountain.
This is interesting. It is the highest natural spot in Dade County.
He must mean natural because there's grass on it. But, yep, you're looking at the only thing Dade County can truly call a mountain, this 42-foot-high hill. I mean, have you seen any place higher?
Down here, no. This would be tall.
It doesn't look like 42 feet.
That's the tallest thing in South Florida, aside from maybe I-95.
Have you seen anything taller than Greynolds Mountain in South Florida?
Yeah, my apartment. I'm on the 16th floor.
Now, some people might claim it's only a mound, but it's not that easy to climb over 30 feet of grassy hill, topped by another 10 feet of Coral Rock Castle, which brings to mind the big question of Grendels Park Mountain. What's underneath it?
I don't know.
Lava.
I think another rock.
Maybe secret treasure? I really don't know.
Somebody said there's an Indian buried ground or everything. But really what it is there is old machinery. What they used to bury to build the park, after they left it there, they covered it with dirt.
You know, I've always wanted to know what happened to the machinery after it built this park during the Great Depression. Of course it got covered up to build a mountain. And if you're a kid from Florida who's seeing your very first mountain, now do you know what you're supposed to do with it?
Oh, she does.
Yeah.
Right, Evelyn? Well then, speak. Roll down the hill.
Well, that's fine if you're a kid. Me, I like mountains for the view. I mean, have you ever had a better view of Dade County? John Holden, News 4. Architecture has always been man's message to the future, a description of how ornate or simple a society can be. Miami's hardly been the leader in architectural trends until these buildings took to the skyline. Buildings of such startling color and functional simplicity that even Time magazine took interest this week, a magazine that hasn't always looked so kindly on Miami. When I decided to track down the firm responsible, it was easy finding the address. It was the name that gave me problems.
Excuse me, is this Architectica?
No, Architectonica.
Architectonica.
No, Architectonica.
So what's in a name anyway, right? It's just that this name actually means architectural in Spanish. I needed to only enter the office door to come face to face with what Time magazine calls the brash young trio behind Architectonica: Lorinda Spear, Hervin Romney, and Bernardo Fort Brescia.
Our work is not exactly a style. It's really more a spirit, a certain attitude.
Miami is a naturally beautiful city, but the buildings that have been built here are generally not up to par with the environment.
Excellence in architecture is my primary goal, and all three of us share that.
Architectonica certainly has changed Miami's skyline, and along with it, modern architecture.
Once upon a time, fountains used to be the in thing in architecture. Then it became jacuzzis.
But if Architectonica represents the wave of the future for architecture, you're going to find those jacuzzis almost anywhere, beautifully lost in its architecture. John Holden, News 4. It's the worst thing that can happen when it's 90 degrees in rush hour traffic. A stalled car, a rising temper, and absolutely no one willing to help from this sea of motorists. Or is there? At South Florida's answer to the Cape Crusader. He's Captain Kendall. Don't let the mask and the yellow leotards fool you. Nowadays, superheroes don't need to leap tall buildings. Their style's much more down to earth, like helping stranded motorists.
What's the problem?
The car won't start.
Let's take a look.
Okay. Of course, anyone would be suspicious if a masked man came to fix your car. But you see, this is Captain Kendall's full-time job for Kendall Toyota, and the uniform goes with the territory.
Sure you know what you're doing? You're not a fruitcake, are you? Yes, sir, I sure do. No, I don't feel foolish at all. I feel my uniform should be a symbol to other motorists that they too should be good Samaritans and try and help broken down cars on the highway.
Every rush hour, you're bound to spot his super-colored truck from Cutler Ridge to North Miami, cruising the highways to help. They may be out of gas, a flat tire, or a stalled engine, but Captain Kendall's motto is service, no matter how he's received.
A couple people lock themselves in the car. A lot of them think they're on candid camera.
Yet most surprising in this day and age of superheroes is his fee. No charge, ever.
You fix the car free?
I think he's a whacker, but I love him.
John Holden, News 4. Let's face it, you can't really enjoy the kind of life Florida has to offer unless you have some way to get around on water. Some people do it in a rubber boat, a sailboat, a small boat, a big boat, and then there's Stu Dahlberg's boat.
It's sort of a car boat, obviously. Couldn't afford a boat, so I just turned my car into a boat.
You see, 8 years ago, this Volkswagen parts dealer from Cape Coral decided to extend the life of his old '68 Volkswagen Bug by attaching a mold of its body to a 13-foot tri-hull and making it a water bug.
It took me 5 years and 3,000 hours. It's just been worth the expressions in people's faces. I feel like an entertainer.
It's true he does get a lot of strange stares from passing boats, but when you're going for a ride with Stu, it almost feels like you are in a car on the highway. And there certainly are advantages to having a car that swims.
We can fish from it, we can scuba dive out of it. We don't have to worry too much about getting a flat tire. It's kind of hard to push start, though.
But the best thing about this car is you never have to worry about that center line if you're on the right or left-hand side. Of course, there's no other cars out here anyway, though.
have problems with the local police once in a while, but they're primarily just curious.
You got an anchor? We've got an anchor. We've got a horn. You want a horn? Here's a horn.
But otherwise, can you think of a nicer afterlife for a 20-year-old Volkswagen? Or a nicer guy to give you a lift?
Dude, thanks a lot for the ride. Appreciate it.
Been my pleasure. Be careful, don't trip on the curb there.
No, don't worry about that. Take care.
See you later.
John Holden, News 4. If you're like me on the weekends, it's nice to sleep late. And if you happen to have fallen asleep in the Grove, well, this was the perfect place to wake up. Especially if you brought your bed, because this was Bed Race Day.
On your mark, get set!
Folks, you're looking at 75 of the most competitive beds in South Florida, along with their pit crews and riders, the people who make the difference between a bed that rocks and rolls.
Now, what's important in bed racing is not how soft the bed is, not even if you can get to sleep in it. All that's really important in bed racing is speed.
Well, we clocked it at about 72 miles an hour, but we don't know how accurate that is. We suggest, maybe 65.
We're turning 11:06.
I think it's pretty fast. I think we can do it.
I wouldn't know in terms of miles per hour. I don't know. It's as fast as I can run.
Of course, there are those who really don't care how fast their bed goes, just so they have a good time. When your entry fee is $400 a bed, with proceeds going to muscular dystrophy, what's important is putting on a show for that unique breed of race fan you can only find at bed races.
Is this the way you always come to a bed race, with a bed on your head?
Yeah, usually. We dress like this during the week, so I don't see anything strange about it.
Well, I think it's an appropriate place to get out of bed and come to a bed race.
It is a great race. Don't you like my snake?
I love it. Then there are those who take bed racing very seriously. Teams like Rich Photo, who won this bed race for the third year in a row, 100 yards in 10.85 seconds. Of course, the real winner is MDA, with over $70,000 raised. Everyone else deserves a good night's sleep. John Holden, News 4. The Olympics, the very thought of it builds up stamina, releases adrenaline, and pushes an athlete to his physical limit. It's also a rainbow of nations and events, with always the thought of gold waiting at the other end.
And you know, that's one thing about athletes. No matter how tough the competition, they're always going for the gold.
I think this was my first clue I wasn't really in Los Angeles, but even here at the Miami Seaquarium, the Olympic spirit abounds. Welcome to Flipper's Olympics. Folks, you're looking at some of the most athletic dolphins in the world. With flags to represent their countries and an Olympic flame to light their start, you're about to see the most synchronized swimming, the fastest relays, the highest hurdles a dolphin can do. Sure, these athletes are limited to only water sports, but their competitive spirit goes far beyond.
Some of the performers here, especially Flipper and Dawn, are a little stronger in their aerial events, a little higher at jumping, and they do enjoy competing.
This is the first day of the Seaquarium's newest dolphin show, which will be performed 3 times a day for the next 6 months. Of course, the kids here have come to see the star, Flipper, but people like me are interested in the more adult things, like Olympic competition. I mean, even the Dolphins' head trainer agrees with that.
It's just like it's like the Olympics for us. It's that exciting.
You bet it's exciting, especially when they get the gold. It's enough to make you stand up and cheer. Just watch your step in doing it. John Holden, News 4. Today was the day a sailboat captain dreams about. The day when Biscayne Bay becomes a sea of sails, each waiting its turn for the anticipated drop of a flag and sound of a cannon. This marked the start of the 31st annual Columbus Day Regatta, the second largest sailboat race in the world, but even more importantly, the biggest party at sea. 738 of these vessels were actually here to race today. The rest of the 2,000 sails you see carried sailors like me, the spectator type, who knows nothing about jibs, anchors, or even sailing for that matter, but loves to watch others do the work.
There's more people that come for the party than come to race by almost 2 to 1.
It's the spectators who promote the party atmosphere of this annual race, and they do it with things like balloons, filled with water, of course, and thrown at whatever boat comes within throwing distance, racing or not. Now, if those boats are a little farther away, you need something a little more powerful, like a funnelator, a surgical hose tied to a funnel for a more accurate hit. Despite these shenanigans at sea, we mustn't forget there is a serious race going on among sails of every size, shape, and color, each competing in its own class, each heading for the finish line at Elliott Key, 14 miles away. This is only the end of the first day of racing, and as contestant numbers are held high for race officials to record times, no one really knows how they stand in this year's regatta. They won't know until the race ends tomorrow in Miami. In the meantime, they have an entire night ahead of them to do what us spectators have done all day: party.
Spinnaker flying, partying, swimming.
I just go for the idea that we can get out, get away from the office, get away from everything, and just go sailing, and that's it.
John Holden, News 4. It used to be something you'd only see on Spanish-speaking stations. You know, those commercials on Cuban foods like black beans.
Los frijoles negros Kirby quedan suavecitos.
Well, guess what? Sooner or later, it had to happen.
Hi, honey. Hi. What's for supper?
Your mother's meatloaf and my black beans and rice.
Black beans? That's a Cuban dish.
You might call it the Cubanization of Americans or the Americanization of Cubans. But the fact is, when two cultures are so closely intertwined, they're bound to mix.
I saw you and the children enjoying it at Caliocho, and we had it at your boss's house.
I mean, ask any American in Miami what their favorite Cuban food is, and they're bound to have one.
Palomino steak, I like that the best.
It's called sandwich de pavo, but it's a turkey sandwich.
Yeah, I have so many of them, I really couldn't just narrow it down to one.
Or for that matter, ask any Cuban American what their favorite American food is.
Favorite American food, the Whopper.
Southern fried chicken.
Hamburgers. Oh, hamburger. I love it.
And speaking of hamburgers, where else do you find such an American institution as McDonald's serving coffee cubano as an entree? And where else do you find a popular Cuban restaurant named after the corner of Texas? Even our most prominent American, President Reagan, chose to eat here 3 years ago, although there's no chance of using his same water glass plate or knife, fork, and spoon anymore. No, they've been stored away safely in a bank vault.
Maybe some days the United States want to keep this for the history. The President Reagan is coming to this place.
So see, it doesn't matter if you're American or Cuban, our taste buds are the same anyway, and that's something to sing about. John Holden, News 4. Call this a typical Sunday at Jumbo's, an eclectic mixed crowd of black and white stopping for a main course or just a discourse after a morning in church. But then that's the way it is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at this diner in Liberty City. The reason?
Well, they have good food for one thing. They really have good food.
That's good food and good friends. You know, when you meet good friends and good food, you got to go keep it going back there.
And they've been coming here for 30 years. Sure, things have changed since it first opened its doors in 1955, but somehow through it all, through segregation and integration, through the riots of 1980, Jumbo's remained untouched. You can thank Isidore Flam and his son Bobby for that.
It's all word of mouth. And we've made it.
He reaches out, you know, no matter who you are, what color you are, you know, and he's just a great guy.
So we must have something on the ball. What else can I tell you?
Now, in 30 years of doing business, one thing hasn't changed here at Jumbo's. In fact, it's what Jumbo's is now famous for: jumbo shrimp.
This is the main reason customers keep coming back. And if you want the recipe, well, the answer to that hasn't changed either.
It's a secret. That's the secret. And nobody makes a shrimp like Jumbo's.
And treat your customers like you still expect to treat them 30 years later. John Holden, News 4.
This is the best supper you have ever cooked.
One thing you can say about the Friesen family of Venice: they love corn. Why, just ask them how much they love to eat corn on the cob.
Really much.
Right. You know good?
Or how much they love to eat popcorn.
I mean, popcorn, I can't get enough popcorn.
But popcorn on the cob? Well, they don't call Wesley Friesen the corn cob king for nothing.
He's so corny, he doesn't even know what he's doing with all that corn.
Oh, he knows all right. In fact, his Corny Brothers factory is now a worldwide business in Venice. Here, hybrid corn cobs are packaged for the consumer to pop at home. Thousands of them that will sell for over $1 a cob.
By noontime, we have about 1,000
packed to ship out.
And you know, when you think about it, it makes sense. We're all used to eating corn on the cob, and, well, we're all used to popping corn, so why not pop your corn on the cob?
That's natural state of popcorn. That's the way it grows, right on the cob. I hate to say this, but it popped in my head.
Oh, that's another thing about Wesley. He also harvests quite a crop of corn jokes.
They're a little corny, though, but you get your earful.
Yeah. And so on he goes, or pops, with virtually every use of a corn cob there can possibly be.
Well, not exactly. You sort of threw one on me here when you came with his corn cob microphone.
But you know, it just pops the question, how come we never thought of making money from such a simple idea, especially such a deliciously good idea?
Really good.
John Holden, News 4 in Venice. At first you might think it's nothing more than a junkyard, an eyesore of odds and ends that somehow got stacked at this one place along the Miami River. But then you start noticing specific things that could be of value, like this 4-ton ship's anchor, a locker door, or this weathered warehouse for military clothing.
And don't let the street sign fool you either. I mean, we're not even close to Southwest 100th Street. It's just one of the many treasures for sale at Stone Age Antiques.
Yep, nearly anything under the sun can be found here, and taken home for a price. That's why owner Gary Stone doesn't care if people sometimes call his business a junkyard.
One man's junk is another man's treasure. I was delivering about $25,000 worth of material on a truck, and I was stopped in the middle of the expressway and asked, am I going to the dump? So I said, no, I'm not going to the dump.
This is the place where motion picture companies and television shows like Miami Vice often come to rent props, or where bars and pubs choose a theme and buy their knickknacks to hang from the ceiling. I mean, where else can you find the original Kellogg's rooster that once stood atop the Kellogg's building in Chicago, or an 8-foot-tall copper still from Tennessee?
I don't know if anything's too typical that I sell in my shop, but I try to buy the bizarre thing or the strange. For instance, if you want something from the sea, we got it. Well, how about trains? You want trains? We got them.
Virtually anything, from barber poles to grizzly bears. Oh, it's true he can't fill every order.
I once had a movie come in here and ask me for a dead rat.
But after 20 years of collecting things that most other people throw out, you might say he understands the real value of junk.
So what can I help you with?
I don't really see anything I need.
John Holden, News 4. If you're a tourist, you might say this was a good day or a bad day to visit Vizcaya.
Anybody home?
Good, because for the next 4 days, it's free admittance to the grounds of this turn-of-the-century villa, reminiscent of Renaissance Italy. Bad, because you can't go inside, unless you're a pest control person. You see, this is the week Vizcaya is being tented for termites. Evidence of termites was found last February in the attic of this mansion museum, once owned by James Deering of International Harvester fame, and now described by National Geographic as the most beautiful home in America. Museum people claim there's no immediate danger from these wood-munching pests, that this is just a $15,000 preventive measure.
Of course, we like to take care of that matter right away and protect also the artifacts we have in the house.
But for Bob Brown and his crew of 15 pest controllers, it's their most publicized task to date, with 72 rooms to gas and 45,000 square feet to cover.
We're used to doing big buildings. This is all we actually do.
You might become another Christo.
We'd like to. Like to have his money.
But just because there's a tent covering the mansion, don't let that stop you from visiting Vizcaya. Remember, there's still 10 acres of beautiful Renaissance gardens, and that's still open to the public.
Of course, not all tourists who came to see Vizcaya were satisfied with mere pictures in the garden and a tented-up mansion.
We was more interested in seeing inside the house than getting in free.
But if you consider it as an artwork in itself, call it Vizcaya under pest control, it's worth the trip before it all comes down this Thursday. But then again, that all depends on how artistic your outlook is. John Holden, News 4. These days, it's not enough for a new building to be new. It has to be the biggest. For instance, One Boca Place. With 283,000 square feet of space, it's supposed to be the biggest commercial building in Boca Raton when it's finished.
Now, this is the lobby of One Boca Place. It's about 56 feet tall. But do you ever wonder why they make lobbies this tall? Well, one reason is for the tall sculptures they put in here.
Like this sculpture, 42 feet tall, 8.5 tons of steel. It's so big, in fact, it had to be lowered into the lobby by crane before they could even finish the roof. And yes, it too holds a big record as the tallest indoor sculpture in the state of Florida. But then its world-famous artist is used to coming up with monumental designs for monumental spaces.
Like in the Renaissance, I think the artist must each time work in relation with the environment, and that's important.
And the name of his latest giant masterpiece? There is none. Robert rarely puts a name to his art. Rather, he leaves that to the eye of the beholder, like those who beheld it here, the plumbers, electricians, and construction workers.
What would you name this sculpture?
Oh, the popular term right now seems to be Titanic.
Well, why do you say that?
It looks like something you can find on the bottom of the ocean floor. I'd call it the forward pass.
Why is that?
Looks like something that you'd see at a football stadium or something like that.
Bird of paradise or something.
What does it look like? How would you describe it?
Well, I ain't never seen nothing like it, really. Just call it modern art. That's about it. You know, I wouldn't know what to call it. I think we could probably build something similar out of plumbing pipe.
Like I say, art is in the eye of the beholder. John Holden, News 4.
Notice the 70s everywhere.
By now, we all know that Bob Weaver can talk fast.
But tomorrow will be a bit warmer.
And some of us know he can talk even faster. You see, Bob has been an auctioneer for 10 years, what he calls a natural outgrowth of reporting temperatures.
You have to be an auctioneer to be a weatherman because it's the only way you can get through 30 minutes of weather in 2.5 minutes.
And it's the only way to get through tons of general merchandise for the highest dollar. This is one of the many public auctions of unclaimed property he calls for the city of Miami. But let me warn you, if you've never been to an auction before, don't expect what you buy to always be as predictable as the weather.
There are times when you can get really good deals on merchandise. But you see, we've never seen this stuff. And the people don't look at it. They can't because it's all stored away. So you take your chance with it.
People like Roy Hamilton. He bought a box of something, sight unseen.
All through, sold to you, $35.
He said various things was in there, so I bid for it. I bid $35 and I got it.
What did he get? About 15 tubes of toothpaste.
Do you use a lot of toothpaste?
Oh yes, Colgate, yeah.
And 30 pairs of underwear, 10 bars of soap, 15 bottles of shampoo, 10 cans of deodorant. Not bad for $35. But then not everyone is as lucky as Roy. Some people bid without meaning to.
So do you.
And end up $10 poorer, but one broken radio richer. John Holden, News 4. When it comes to fishing, he's the legend of Bimini, Willie James Duncombe, the oldest fishing guide in the Bahamas. And as you might expect of someone who's lived 72 years on an island, Willie can reel in a lot of stories in both the people he's met and the fish he's caught.
Well, I remember the biggest bonefish I've ever caught was with Sammy Sneed, the golfer, and he weighed 15 pounds.
Bone fishing is something you can expect to find Willie doing nearly every day on this island. In fact, most people know him only as Bonefish Willie, but Willie wants to be known only for what he does best, guiding people like me through the island mangroves and searching for the best spot to catch a bonefish, the only fish Willie considers a true match for a sports fisherman.
That's because it's one of the fastest fish in action. It got more action than most fish. It's very wise.
In fact, only one thing excites Willie more than fishing for bonefish, and that's fishing for man.
Without Jesus, he would have gone straight to hell.
You see, this small island community knows Bonefish Willie by yet one more name, Bishop Duncombe, the man whose calling is to save their souls.
Good to you! It's a power from heaven. It's called the Holy Ghost. Take control of you. Lift you up. Turn you around.
And send you right over the pews.
Send you over the pews. I was sick! Lord, get to me!
Sometimes it can be hard to imagine this same person as your fishing guide, but Bonefish Willie always seems to find your fish.
Yeah. Boy, oh boy, John, you got a bone, John.
All right. And that's what makes him such a fishing legend.
All right. Okay, let's pose for this picture.
John Holden for CBS News. It's a must for any South Florida wardrobe, whether you plan to get wet or not. The bikini, especially a custom-made bikini. But if you think a dynamite fit takes a lot of time, then you haven't tried TNT Bikinis.
Most of the bikini shops that do custom bathing suit stores claim that they'll have it ready in a week. People don't like to wait 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 5 weeks to find that their bathing suit doesn't fit. We don't do that here. If you come in here and you tell me at 9 o'clock in the morning or 10 o'clock in the morning that you have a plane at 11:30, sit down, I'll make you a suit.
You see, Stuart Ample claims to be the fastest bikini maker in the world. So just how fast is he?
I can do a bathing suit in less than 10 minutes. I work wide open as fast as the machine could go, and I cut a pattern for a girl in less than a minute. My fastest is 7 minutes, 57 seconds.
Not bad for a former bodybuilder, now turned bathing suit designer. In fact, Stuart claims to owe his speed to those days of measuring up his muscle competition.
It's all done by eyesight. When I was a bodybuilder, I was able to check my competition out, and I could tell, you know, if I had an 18-inch arm, if he had a 17-inch arm, and the more you deal with the measurements, and the more you pick up. Fantastic, beautiful fit.
Yes, it's hard to believe this colorful burst of bikini was just a scrap of fabric a mere 15 minutes ago, but then this designer takes pride in creating a splash in a flash.
You finish a bathing suit, see somebody happy in a piece of fabric. It's like putting leaves on a tree. It's the most beautiful thing.
John Holden, News 4, Boca Raton.